Hello. I'm going to talk about two very interesting subjects from Gurdjieff, which concerns the laws of world creation and world maintenance, the law of three and the law of seven, or the triam as a camno and the hepta paraparshanok. Creation exists of entities that are created. And then after their creation, they proceed in a certain manner. There's one law for creation and one law for their journey. These subjects are very subtle, and they cannot be understood with the ordinary intelligence. They require an inner shift that is difficult to explain. As the basis of this talk, I have collated together a large number of statements from Gurdjieff, but I'm going to use as a backdrop a book by J.G.Bennett called the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a symbol that unifies both laws together. And in this book, Bennett explains many aspects of the two laws, and he makes many mistakes that I think are very typical when these laws are understood by the ordinary human mind and not by the mind that senses the subtle, imperceptible flow of the abstract metaphysics inside creation. Bennett starts by trying to model business processes in terms of the law of three and the law of seven. In this diagram we see what he calls the triad of manufacturing: management, product, market. Well, we can begin with the first mistake. It says management. Why management? A management is only a small part of a business. The market is the market, the product is the product, and it should be the business, it's not the management. So there's a problem of scale. He's included things here of different scales. So it should be at the top: business, product, and market. But the law of three is not a process. The law of three is an event. It is conception. It is how things are born. So if we want to model a business transaction with a market, then the conception, the event, is the sale. So it should be business, sale, market. Simple. It's funny, because when Bennett went over to France to see Gurdjieff, he spent most of the time bedding a woman there who was not his wife. So he should have been more familiar with the magical energy of the law of three. And it is a magical energy. The man and the woman are there, and they struggle and revolve around each other, and still nothing happens until a special process occurs. And then suddenly there is the emergence of a third force, conception, that makes something happen. It initiates a new life at the point of delivery. In fact, I was thinking about this because the sexual act is one kind of process, but it's not conception. Conception happens later. I'm not sure when exactly it is. It must be when the material inside the sperm enters inside the egg, and there something happens. But nevertheless, the sexual act has its own transmission, which is strongly felt. So there's several layers of conception occurring there, several scales of the law of three. Let's hear from Gurdjieff. He says, "The teaching of the three forces is at the root of all ancient systems. The first force may be called active or positive, the second passive or negative, the third neutralizing. But these are merely names, for in reality all three forces are equally active, and appear as active, passive and neutralizing only at their meeting points. That is to say, only in relation to one another at a given moment. The first two forces are more or less comprehensible to man, and the third may sometimes be discovered either at the point of application of the forces, or in the medium, or in the result. But speaking in general, the third force is not easily accessible to direct observation and understanding. The reason for this is to be found in the fundamental limitations of man's ordinary psychological activity, and in the fundamental categories of our perception of the phenomenal world, that is, in our sensation of space and time resulting from these limitations. People cannot perceive and observe the third force directly any more than can spatially perceive the fourth dimension. The man and the woman can be seen, but when they enter into a particular process, a third ghost appears, and many magical things happen there which they know very well and don't need to understand, because that magical energy, whether it is in the lowest story and is the sexual reconciling, or in the middle story and is the emotional reconciling, those are the things that they love the most, because in those moments heaven and earth are unified, and the force of life flows through them, and it is a force. It's like hot wiring God at your scale. And those are the things they sing about and write about and dream about. Isn't it? Whilst I'm here, I will include a part that Ouspensky wrote as follows. I recollect another remark which afterwards proved a ground for much wrong reasoning and many wrong conclusions. This was that the three centers of the lowest story, the instinctive, the moving, and the sex centers, work in relation to each other in the order of the three forces, and that the sex center in normal cases acts as a neutralizing force in relation to the instinctive and moving centers acting as active and passive. The method of exposition of which I am speaking and G's suppressions in his first talks resulted in the creation of such misunderstanding, more particularly in later groups not connected with my work. That's a very important statement that Ouspensky has recollected. And of the three English teachers, Bennett and Nicole and Ouspensky, who have introduced a hell of a lot of nonsense into the teaching, Ouspensky stands out as having a lot of quality. So much so, you really have to feel a bit sad that he couldn't overcome his difficulties. For the other two, not so. So, in the question of whether there are 3 centers or 5, well, there are both. Every story has 3. But mankind in his evolution is at a very special stage. He is on the 5th. And that is the place where unusual things happen to entities. And a special precaution has to be taken in order that they continue to evolve. More on that later. Now, if we go back to Bennett's diagram of the law of 3, it comes with this text. The first requirement is that the management should be clear as to what it intends to achieve. Secondly, it must clarify the procedures it will follow. And thirdly, it must put these procedures successfully into operation. For this to happen, there must be a high potential at the initial stage. That is, there must be not only a strong driving force to get the product moving, but also some powerful and usually novel idea without which the company cannot impress itself upon its public. Well, I'm sure many managers would think in that kind of block-headed, forceful, whipping dictator way, because that's all they understand, violence. But the law of 3 is not that. It is magic. Suddenly the gate opens and the light flows through. Now I'm sure you've all been in bed with a wonderful partner. Isn't that what happens? Suddenly the gate opens. Let's hope there weren't any managers in your bed at the time.